Good morning. Happy 11th day of Christmas. Happy second Sunday after Christmas Day. Welcome to Trinity Church Online. Not with our usual 3 cameras and sound system and hard-working tech people, but this is low-tech Trinity, the church laptop in the rector's living room. So, Nancy, oh yeah, never mind. You've muted yourself. I was making sure you did. Okay. The second Sunday after Christmas gives us choices for the gospel. We can read Luke's account of Jesus in the temple as a 12-year-old, conversing with the learned teachers, confronted by his anxious parents, and announcing to them, the parents, and them, the elders that he's been talking with, that he is in his Father's house where he belongs. He does then go home with his parents and was obedient to them. The other choice, which obviously is the one we have read today, is the Epiphany story from Matthew, the visit of the Magi. Now, over here on my, let's see here, if you can see these. Can you see these? I should be able to make this a bigger screen. What did you say?
You can come up and see.
So can you see these?
Yes.
All right. So there are the Magi, and are some candles, and there is a representation of the Holy Family, and there is the star. These Magi are somewhere in my house, all during the season that actually is the 12 days of Christmas, and then they stay after a while because of Epiphany. At any rate, I wanted to mention a couple of things. That tomorrow is, in the church year, is the feast of the Epiphany. It's also called 12th night, the 12th day after Christmas, and it is always on January 6th. Today, January 5th, then, is also always the eve of the Epiphany, but this year it is also the second Sunday after the Epiphany. This story, the visit of the Magi, demonstrates the spread of the word of God, the good news of Jesus Christ, beyond Bethlehem, beyond the shepherds and anybody that they told. This is the representation of this message having spread to the Gentiles well beyond the tiny reign of Palestine. And I don't know if you could see those figures very carefully, very easily. They're all not cooked, they're all crocheted. But they represent people from all over the world. There is a person with a black face. There is a person with an Asian face. There is a person with a Northern European white face. And they're representative of the entire world. That's the intention of this. And then, but they probably actually came, we think of them as coming from as far away as, India or China. The chances are,
Here from there.
I'm sorry, what? No, actually, somebody else does. They can't be from there really, but that's all tradition. And another piece of the tradition is that they are possibly from Babylon, in that the sort of heart of astrology in the Middle East at the time was Babylon. Sometimes they're thought of being from Persia, which is modern day Iran. It doesn't really matter where they've come from, except that they are representative of the entire Gentile world. The other thing about them is that they saw the star at its rising. They apparently then figured out and calculated where approximately it would be. And they took themselves there and they end up in Jerusalem. If the star had been still visible to them, they would not have had to stop and talk to Herod. And as I said, this story doesn't matter if it's accurate or not. What it's doing is telling us something really important. They stop and talk to Herod, and then they go on. And lo and behold, the star reappears for them and stops over the house where the child is. But do you remember the story that we just read on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day? If you remember that story, which I certainly hope you do, you may also remember that Mary held these things and pondered them in her heart. All the things the shepherds said, everything that they had told her and told them about the angels, and all the things that have happened to her up to this point, she's pondering in her heart. And you have the sense that there's more going on, that there's some that gives a sense of foreboding in a way. It gives a sense of awareness that there is more to this story than just the birth of a child. And as we talked about on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, this birth story, the child in the manger, would not mean a thing without the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. If we weren't paying attention to the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus, we wouldn't care a bit about a birth story of someone we didn't hear that was just born. When he was born, sorry, I'm getting myself sidetracked, but the whole point is that the birth story would not be of any significance whatsoever without the crucifixion and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. This story then that we have in the Christmas story is both that crucifixion and resurrection loom both ahead and behind the child in the manger. So today's story of the Magi visiting, we have the same double awareness. We see the death looming, and we see the resistance already present to who this child is. This resistance and this looming presence of something against this child is right there in the consultation with Herod. Herod is immediately threatened by what the Magi are telling him. He gets everybody together, people who would not otherwise actually talk to him, but he is wondering about where the child is. He wants to know where the King of the Jews is to be born. He's threatened because he considers himself the King of the Jews, even though, as a matter of fact, he's been appointed by Rome. And he sees the threat of Jesus as the Messiah taking over his position. So he consults those leaders, and then he pulls the Magi aside and he says, go to the find out where the child is exactly, and then come back and tell me so I can go bear him homage. He also talks to them in detail, apparently, about when they first saw that star and how long they've been traveling. Because in the section that follows this gospel story is the story that we call the slaughter of the innocents. And it's an account of Herod having every male child in Bethlehem under the 2 and under killed. That's right there at the end after this story. So there's already this fear and threat for this child. And even with the wise men coming, that fear and threat is there. And then the wise men bring gifts, and they bring 3 gifts. And I'm going to let you turn your mics on and somebody tell me, what are the gifts? Anybody tell me?
Frankincense.
That's one of them, frankincense.
Gold.
Gold is another one. What's
Myrrh.
another?
Myrrh.
Myrrh. And what do we know from the song, We Three Kings of Orient Are? What do we know that gold represents?
Royalty.
Yes, royalty. That's right. And what do we know that frankincense represents?
Deity.
Yes, deity, because that is frankincense is incense, and it's what was burned and is occasionally still burned as a prayer rising to the deity. And what about myrrh?
Death.
Death represents death. And why does it represent death? Anybody remember? Because it's used in embalming, it's used in preserving a body at the time of death. When we hear about Jesus at the tomb, and we hear a lot of people going to take him, the women taking spices, one of the spices is myrrh.
Hey, Tamsen, I'll suggest too, the gold provided a practical way for the family to escape.
It possibly did. It did. It's being a gift that's going to be used very quickly. And that has been mentioned before. Thank you. This idea of what the gifts mean. Leslie, your hand's up. Did you want to say something?
No, I'm just listening. Thank you.
Okay, but you can hear now. Excellent.
Yes.
Okay, good. The who knows the names of the traditional names of the three magi?
Melchior, Balthazar, and Gaspar.
Thank you. Yes, Melchior, Balthazar, and either Gaspar or Caspar. The names came from a person who wrote the ecclesiastical history of the English people, and that was the Venerable Bede in the 8th century. He's the first person, as far as we know, who gave names to the Magi, and also one of the first people to suggest some meanings for the gold, the frankincense, and the myrrh. Not the first necessarily, but one of the first. He was a British, he was in Great Britain in, as I said, the 8th century. He was born in the 7th century and lived into the 8th century. So born in the 600s, lived into the 700s. So those names have been traditional for all that time. What is something, anybody remember what we did last year outside the church? And I sent you home with blessed chalk if you wanted to take it home. Anybody remember what we did at Epiphany? They're still on the walls of the church, on the doors, above the doors.
Put
I
the
remember writing something above the doors or on the doors.
Right. And the date is one thing. That's what John said. So what we wrote last year was 20 CMB 24. So does that give you a hint of what we should write this year? 20 CMB
25.
25. That's right.
What is
And
the 20?
the 20 is the year 2000.
Oh,
And then the
okay.
25 is the year in 2000 it is.
Okay.
If we were in the 1900s,
To
it
the
would be
19.
19 and then whatever. So, and then CMB, what do you suppose those represent? How about Caspar, Melchior, and Balthazar?
Oh,
It also possibly represents a Latin phrase, which I did not take Latin in school. Long story, but so I may not pronounce this correctly, but it's Christus mansionem Benedicat. And that would be Christ bless this house, or may Christ bless this house. So the this again is tradition speaking. This comes from both the Orthodox and the Roman Catholic traditions. And it is considered to be the names of those three people and then a blessing. And the reason that we use chalk is it is a substance of the earth available most anywhere in the world. It's a way of blessing a house or a building like a church. It's a symbol of hospitality. Come on in. And it is a witness to faith. I remember last year, several of you coming in, and some people from the 12-step groups have come in and said, what is this? And so we can talk about who Jesus is and why we have that on our door. This is all pointing to the importance of this story for us. It's a lovely story. It may not have a lot of anchoring in what we can find in terms of facts and figures and things written down. But what it does is it does three things. One is it gives us these three people representative of Gentiles in general, and that includes almost all of us. And it gives us the sense of the awareness of seeing something and then following it. And it gives us the presence of Jesus Christ. So the star is what's shining. The star shines at the beginning, at its rising. The Magi see it. They make a journey, basically guessing where they're going or being able to use, they are astrologers, but they also probably had the mathematical abilities that astronomers have in terms of going a direction they think they should go. And then the star appears again after they've stopped to see Herod. The star then is what's shining, and it is shining with the light of Christ. And the whole Epiphany season is about revelation, about this revelation to the Magi. Then next week, Jesus is going to be baptized, and it's the revelation to him and to the people around him of who he is. Then he's going to start calling his disciples, another form of revelation. And finally, at the end of the Epiphany season, we'll have the transfiguration of Jesus on the mountaintop, which is the revelation to Peter, James, and John directly, with Moses and Elijah on either side, of Jesus in the middle, the fulfillment of the law and the prophets. But I have a question for all of us, because one of the points of this story is that if Jesus is the light, the star that the Magi are following, how is that star still shining today? How are we the ones shining with the light of Christ, pointing to Jesus as individuals? And how are we as the church, the shining star, pointing to the community, pointing to Jesus? So I'm inviting you to open your microphones up and say something about that if you have a thought. How are we individually shining like the star to shine toward Jesus, to point toward Jesus? And how do we as the church do that?
Because of our beliefs and our faith.
It's difficult. It's difficult to shine. Sometimes we're way too dim.
Well, I realized I mentioned my church to a lot of people. So most people that know me even mildly know that I'm a Christian.
When you share the gospel or anything that has to do with Christ, then you're pretty much leading somebody else to Christ himself.
Okay, that was Richard the 5th, and Nancy and Betty Bowen. Anybody else?
I think when we individually follow our call or our vocation, and then communally or as church, when we listen to each other's stories and receive and accept.
You know, for me, practicing in healthcare is an opportunity each time to be able to be a beacon of light for my patients. A lot of times there's conditions that perhaps won't resolve. They can't be healed in the bodily sense, but their spirit can be strengthened and they can feel supported in that next phase that God may be taking them to. And that's, for me, an opportunity to be that beacon of light and helping them come closer to Christ.
Thank you, Jess.
Lighting the way for others to follow, generation after generation, not just this generation, but the generation to come.
And all of our outreach efforts.
Yes, when we go out to do ministry,
Yep.
we are being the light of Christ to others.
That's what I was thinking of. The fish donations and the laundry of love and the what is it that
And the garden.
the garden? Well, that goes to
Share.
fish.
Share a meal.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking of the many years I sang in a choir, and especially on Christmas Eve when we sang so beautifully "O Holy Night" and had communion. That was to me, a beautiful showing of Christianity.
Thank you, all of you. You're talking about both personal and group
Community.
community. So as stars as individuals, stars as groups, in a hospital room, on the street, in the grocery store, in the choir, just talking to people about who you are and where you go to church. Anything else?
Eric has one.
Okay, Eric?
By praying and going to church.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Eric. And then the idea of, yes?
Oh, I was going to say, I'm always reminded of songs, but we shouldn't let our light hide underneath the bushel.
Oh, right,
Let
right.
your light shine. I want to walk as a child of the light, that great hymn by Kathleen Thomerson.
Yes.
Sometimes just being in a group and being a quiet presence and a smile on your face is spreading light.
It is. And then Avril talked about the generations. That's that really also, that whole connection from 2000 years ago to today and beyond today, that shining the light and continuing to do that. Thank you all so much. Any one last person want to say something?
This is Nancy. Also, I think it's recognizing the light in others. And in particular, I've lived here 30 years, and one time a kid came by wanting to shovel. Well, yesterday in my mailbox was a note from this man and his son saying they were starting a shoveling business. And if I was interested, text him back and pay what you want, is what they said. I'm like, with this snowstorm, I definitely needed somebody to shovel. So that definitely was their light to me.
And then you're recognizing that light. I said at 8 o'clock, I mentioned that this isn't specific to the sermon. I'll wait for that part until the announcements, but well, actually I won't. Jacob and Taylor and Rosie came yesterday, and Jacob brought spreaders for salt, and he and Rosie salted all the sidewalks and the driveway. the parking lot, and they did that because the vestry, we asked Jacob to fire our parking lot plowers because they were charging about 800 a time they came to visit. And we thought that was too much. So we're in the market for somebody to share his light by, or her light by, perhaps being a small group of people, a small person who can come with a plow. Kathy Smith's husband, Harold, used to do that for us. But in the meantime, I think David Westfall and Jacob and Jacob's children are going to be helping make sure that this place is as accessible as it can be. So that's sharing their light, and the clearing parking lot, even though it is also shining our light for other people for Sunday mornings and all the groups of people who meet here during the week. So just the use of the building, providing the building is a way of shining our lights. All right. Those are the main points I wanted to make were that this story of the Magi is a story that we love, that they don't just stand at the manger or approach the manger and then we don't remember them. We remember them because they come later and because they go home by a different road. When they meet Jesus, they fall on their knees. They aren't Jews. They are not people who have an expectation of the Messiah, but they are people who are seeking the truth. And they seek it until they find it. And when they find it, they recognize it, fall on their knees, provide the gifts that we've already talked about, and go home by a different road. They are changed people, and they are not going to be participating in Herod's vicious attempts to prevent God's presence. So that's the other thing. We need to continue to seek. We find, and then we need to find again, because we often take for granted these stories and our life as Christians. We need to keep seeking, we need to keep finding, and we need to allow ourselves to be changed so that we can be the light shining the way the star shone all those years ago, that we can be the light shining as individuals wherever we are and whatever we're doing, and as Trinity Episcopal Church in St. Charles. Amen.